Hello and welcome back to the podcast, We Are Selling. My name's Lee Woodward, the author of the Complete Salesperson course. Today's podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Nexar. Nexar is a dedicated real estate platform specialising in lead generation and database management of the entire real estate company for BDMs and agents working as one platform to generate opportunity. Nexar seamlessly integrates into your business systems, allowing you to have an extended solution. Let's get started with this week's episode. And joining us now on the podcast for We Are Selling is Lisa Pennell, the CEO of Barry Plant in Victoria, for all our international listeners. Lisa, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We need you here. The world wants to know how to build teams. It's one of your specialties and passions that you have fallen in love with your career. But we might start there from the beginning, a bit of background about Lisa.
Oh, it's been a long and twisted journey, Lee. I began my working career as an undergrad accountant at what was Pricewaterhouse at the time, now PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was studying commerce, spent a couple of years there trying to fit a system that I really didn't fit. And then went on a journey of, exploration, landing opportunities left, right and centre that I probably hadn't anticipated, and that have led me to this role.
Now, Lisa, you've worked for some big brands. You've done some very interesting journo work as well. We might even chat about that. That's when I first came across you, actually. We didn't meet at that time, but you were looking after a mutual client of ours. How was that part of your world, PR, journalism, writing? How did that become a skill?
Well, my mother was a journalist, so it was probably bred into me from a young age. And I guess in these times, writing effectively is a lost art to some degree, and in our industry in particular. So PR I fell into. Brian White, in one of his moments of glory, said, "You'd be good at that." Ray White had never had a PR department before. It's not something I'd done before. And so I jumped into that. I discovered that I had a skill for crisis management. Writing obviously became a big part of that role as well. And when I had my daughter Grace, I had the opportunity to stay home and work from home, set up my own business doing crisis management and writing, and that's really how that journey transpired.
Now, being in crisis management, that prepared you to become a CEO.
Well, it's one of the things that's prepared me. I'm not sure anything can prepare you to be a CEO, to be frank. It's, when you suddenly get to the top of the tree and look around and realise there's no one to go ask, what should I do, that all the decisions do land with you. As I say, that was a surprising moment for me. Call me naive, but it's not something that you can prepare for, I don't believe. It's something you can only learn on the job through trial and error to some degree.
Now, we're about to get deep into a conversation about building teams and what you've observed through that time. But can I ask you, there seems to be a part of your background that you were in retail. Yes, you did commerce, but you're actually with Optus building teams there. Take us into that.
So I was one of the very first, I'm showing my age now, promo girls for Optus when they came to Australia with the mobile network, and then ended up in a retail organisation, actually with Optus and then Telstra retailers. And again, through being offered opportunities from other people who probably saw things in me that I hadn't necessarily seen in myself, would you like to open this office? Would you like to take the state manager role, et cetera, et cetera? And before you know it, you're the leader. I guess there is a natural leadership tendency in some people, and to step into the breach when no one else will. And I guess that's what happened.
It's definitely a characteristic of yours that you are willing to give it a go. I think in leadership, you became very good at building teams, but the people building teams picked you in these teams for some really odd gigs out there.
Absolutely. Yes. Could be a movie, actually, if I told you some of the details. I can't stand suffering, to be honest with you. At my fundamental core, fairness, integrity and being kind is really important to me. I guess that's what I enjoyed about the crisis work. I could always make the right thing happen, in situations where very much the wrong thing had happened. And likewise, in running a team, it's really important to have fairness and integrity in the decisions that you make and the way in which you treat people. So I guess there was a natural, leaning for me in that respect.
Many of our listeners out there right now, no matter where they are in the world, they could have come to a point where they've reached capacity, which means there's only so many hours you can throw at it in a week. And then you start to get that, you were talented, you were good, everyone loved who you are. But as you've got busier, a few complaints have come in. And this is where you need good people around you for a better customer experience, but also just for your own self to protect your environment, your mental health of what you're doing. Because as we know in real estate, we're looking after everybody else's challenges. We are the solution. And that can grind on you after a period of time until you get the right people around you. For those people who want to step into building a team, and this is that opportunity to hear it from someone who's built many teams and now you're just the leader of the biggest team, what would be some of the key deliverables or the key things you've learned or observed about building teams?
Probably it's easiest to highlight what goes wrong in building teams or when people step into that sort of elevated position. I actually think it's kind of a fork in the road where ego can take over or humility and this community can take over. If ego takes over, you're going to be a manager directing people like factory animals, and that's got a very limited lifespan. You'll have big staff turnover. The outcomes will be limited. You're not multiplying yourself. If you're able to see that you just have a different role, doesn't mean you're more important. You don't have power over people in the sense of, the fiefdom of years gone by. It's about bringing people on the journey, almost if you can consider it like the coach of a team as opposed to, the lord of the manor. If you could make that distinction, people don't follow the coach because they yell at them as effectively as they do if they feel motivated. If you can create that motivation and inspire people, you can really do anything.
How interesting. When we look at that, I've actually got a friend who works in Hollywood movies, and he is a specialist camera person. Not filming the camera, he runs the steady camera system that if a bridge has been blown up or a castle or something, and in those situations you get one chance. Preparation is everything. But he was sharing with me that being on a movie set, the movie stars aren't movie stars. They're just all working in a team. They say hello. You don't ask for selfies or anything like that. But in that environment, we've got a movie to do here. This is not the red carpet moment. We're all working together. And I really like that analogy of, okay, we've got a job to do versus, do you know who I am? I'm bigger than you'll ever be. There's no room for that. And I think that's a really good distinction straight away. Take us into filters and understanding.
It's interesting, the comment that you just made around that behaviour. It comes from insecurity, doesn't it? Because if you're trying to have power over another human being, it's because you don't feel like you have power without that. Having empathy around that for other leaders, to understand. A lot of people feel like imposters, coming back to your original statement, particularly when they first start leading, because they think, I've got the job, therefore I need to perform from the get-go, and that means I've got to run around telling everyone what to do. What was that person's lived experience? We would all behave that way if we had that experience. But again, I think there is always a fork in the road with behaviour. Are you going to choose ego or are you going to choose awareness? Because if you're going to have awareness, no one's perfect, no one knows everything. You're not better than anyone else. Just because you have a bigger job or you get paid more doesn't make you more important. Yes, you might have a role that's more critical to the organisation, but the minute you stop that role, you're not important. It's not you, it's the role. And I think making that distinction is critical.
How powerful. And who's going to play that role? Actually, before we came on air, you and I were just chatting about things going on in the world, and I was sharing with you a story about Sir Alex Ferguson, the greatest leader and manager of the Manchester United Football Club, and how he had to move on certain key players who people in normal employment would say, we can't get rid of them. They bring in millions a year. And they've had to move them on for the benefit of others. And that brings me back to that point of an incredible thing mentioned on a podcast about when someone goes, someone grows. It is just a role. It's not that person. And if that person's not here, because one day they're not going to be here, but that role's got to be fulfilled. And you seem to be a person that gives people a chance. And you've mentioned to me, you're very big on safety. Just share that with us.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by neurology, as we were talking about before. And I think, the fight or flight instinct is really important to remember. If someone's in fight or flight because they don't feel safe, they're actually not thinking as a human being. They're thinking as a mammalian or a lizard from past times. And you're not going to get the best out of somebody because they're actually not thinking clearly. They're triggered into a state that, is not at all aware. You're looking for that self-awareness where people can look critically at their work, at themselves, at how they're impacting their teammates. And I think, segueing a little bit, impact versus intention is the biggest mistake that leaders make.
Impact versus intention.
Yes.
I love this. Take me into that.
Okay, let's unpack that. So your intention is to drive along the street and you got distracted by something and you looked to the side and you ran over a kid's bike. I'll make it the bike rather than the kid for the sake of
Thank you. It's a happy show.
And you jump out of the car and you go, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. It actually doesn't matter. You destroyed the bike. So it's kind of pointless. Your intention wasn't to destroy the bike. Luckily, it wasn't the child, but you did. So it actually doesn't matter. You need to stop and say, okay, well, the learning from that is I need to pay attention when I'm driving and not look to the side. That's on me. That's not on the kid, not on the bike, not on the bird. That's on me. And I think it's really important for leaders in particular, every human being, but I think every leader to look at what they did to contribute to anything that happens, whether it's good or bad, and particularly the bad, because that's where the learning is. How did I impact you? Was it what I intended? If not, go back to the drawing board.
Love that. Take us into your view on tasking and skills in a team.
Well, anything can be taught, is my opinion. We were talking before about one of my most recent epiphanies, and that is a very simple determination as to whether someone's going to survive, if you like, in a role or thrive in a role, is I have to look objectively at, are they lacking the skills or are they lacking the motivation? Now, if it is a lack of motivation, have I created enough of safety? Is there incentive? Are they inspired? Is this the journey that they should be on? If they have the motivation and not the skills, that's the best raw material, because we can teach and develop people, and that's exciting for them too. Motivation is very hard to bring in if it's not there inherently.
It's interesting that we can look at all the different occupations in the world, and the music industry fascinates me when you've got classically trained people who went to music school and technically have got greater skills. And then we've got Mick Jagger at 72 still doing stadiums.
Yes.
I saw the greatest thing on Facebook where they had a clip of Joe Biden walking and tumbling and then Mick Jagger taking a stadium, and they're the same age. There's something about the fire in you that can overdo the skills versus, but I'm the most qualified. But do you really want to do it?
Well, and again, that's where, people can get too hung up on, I've got to be the best at. Underneath it all, can you connect with other human beings? I can stand here and try and impress you. That's pointless for you and pointless for me. Or we can stand here and connect with each other and actually share something that maybe someone else will get something from. I hope so. Mick Jagger loves music. He's very passionate and he's a performer. He connects with people. He still exercises every day, so he can jump around on stage. He's acting with purpose. It's interesting. I see a lot of young performers these days because there's not as much live performance opportunity for them. And they'll stand in front of the microphone. You can clearly see they're just trying to be perfect in their vocalisation, and it's almost like an ego thing of, look at me. No one wants to look at a singer standing in front of a microphone, not moving, singing perfectly. They want to see you bouncing around the stage, connecting. That's visually appealing. That's why we go to live music instead of pressing play on Spotify, right? So it's connection. It's always connection. Comes back to that.
And you look at the greatest bands in the world, they're a team.
Yeah.
They've all got their role. I remember a very famous thing from Mick Jagger saying to Charlie Watts that, you are my drummer. And he said, no, you are my singer.
Yes.
Meaning they were both as equally as important. One's out the back, one's out front. And I think we can draw a lot from that, because in a team, it doesn't matter what you're doing, we're all required. And in a real estate office, from reception to owner, there is no hierarchy to that. Someone's got to do the reception. It's so important. And I think when we start to see people at different levels, that's when the team falls apart and the members want to move on.
Let's play that music analogy out a little bit further, Lee. So in the analogy of the Rolling Stones, no one's conducting that band. It relies on each person individually contributing their piece. And as a live musician, as I know personally, there's nothing better than falling back into that, teamwork, if you like. The other version of live music will be with a conductor, but that's not a yelling, shouting thing. That's a guiding thing, because there's so many different elements to the music and everyone's paying attention and everyone wants to follow that leader, but there's nothing violent about it. There's no levels. The conductor's not more important than the flutist or whatever the term will be. Yeah. So playing out that analogy too, these truisms are the case across all aspects of life.
When we look at the current situation of the Australian real estate industry, we know what's happened, we get it. But as we look forward, especially as a modern leader, what do you see next required in the team building space of the real estate industry and the real estate community, what do you think people need to bring onto their radar, their attention to have a better future?
Again, self-awareness. You have to be aware and willing to learn as a leader. I believe the biggest gap in our industry is leadership. A lot of people in our industry who run real estate businesses have not been exposed to anything other than real estate sales. They elevate into a role where they then own the office. And as I say, they don't know what happens in the rest of the world. If they were treated poorly by their previous leader, they're replicating that same behaviour and the cycle continues. So I think there's a real opportunity, and certainly in our group, it's a live discussion that our biggest opportunity is in all of us becoming better leaders, running better teams, and that way we will service our customers even better than we do today.
Well, what an amazing moment of time of recording. No one ever knows where I am with the cheeseboard paddle, by the way, Lisa.
Which is very innovative, I have to say.
It is. It's a system, it's an efficiency, and wherever I go, it works.
Totally. It's impressive. And again, this is unique to you. It's curated to solve a problem that you had, and I love that.
Yeah, and I think for everyone, what's your cheeseboard paddle? Because that's your equipment, that's your rig. When the Stones go on stage, everyone's got to make sure their part's right. You don't just, it's nothing to do with me. It's everything to do with you because the expected behaviour is you will nail this. This will happen. Even this recording. A lot of people think in podcasting and so forth that, you must take all these attempts to do it. They are listening to a live recording. We have not stopped once.
No.
But it's expected behaviour that for two people at our level, that should be the way it is. Otherwise, get off the podcast.
Yep.
With the teams coming in today, because time of recording, we're in the beautiful renovated Barry Plant training room. We have 53 leaders coming into the training rooms today, or the collaboration room, as I'm going to call it. I didn't have a chance to say this to you yet, Lisa, but I absolutely love the room.
Great.
I started my life in these rooms, and unfortunately not unfortunately, you're doing big stages all the time and no one talks to you. Whereas today we get to, how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
And what would you do next? And in progressive learning, even for your own leaders coming in today, what do you want to see your team do with their teams?
Great question. Look, and I'm going to be sitting in with your session as well, Lee, because despite my...
No haggling.
No pressure. Despite my long history in running teams, I don't doubt I'll hear something today that will make me think. In fact, when I saw you on stage at Kickstart, you gave me a line from the day that you can't read the label from the inside of the jar. And that stuck with me. I'll hear something today that equally will give me another epiphany. I love that. It's a learning journey. What do I want for our leaders? I want to keep alive this spirit of curiosity because, again, there's no rule book, here's how to be a good leader. Everyone has to adapt and become a good leader with their own filters, their own life experiences, their own unique abilities and skill sets and whatever else. So it's how can I adapt what I learn with awareness and get better and better every single day. Does that make sense?
It does. Lisa, I get to meet a lot of CEOs due to my profession. And you're very comfortable in your own self in doing this role. And I remember when you were appointed, I thought, wow, there you go. And I love seeing people appointed and I love seeing change in direction in this industry after being in it so long. But only 2 weeks ago, I was working with a senior CEO, like 30 years. And he shared with me in a podcast, like my first 4 years of being a CEO, I had no idea what I was doing. I just thought I'd know what I was doing, but I didn't. And anything is a learned thing. And I think today people have this expectation that they're going to be brilliant in day one, yet you've got to do the work and let yourself take the time to learn whatever it is you're doing. I do believe you have to be your own mechanic today. You've got to know how these things all come together versus someone else will do that for me. And actually, I want to write the book one day. Someone's got to do the work at some point. And being a leader, you've got to work harder than anyone. What's your view on that?
Absolutely. I think, you go into a new role, there's a lot of learning. I don't know how many times I've said I was on a very steep learning curve as a new CEO.
Did you want to be a CEO? Was that on the list?
I don't know the answer to that question, Lee. I go where the charm takes me. So the opportunity arose. I was leaving the industry, as I've said many times before. I was pretty much done with the ethics and the way in which this industry operates. And certainly in franchising. And so when Mike McCarthy put that offer to me, it kind of took me a little bit by surprise, to be honest.
What was your first thought?
Well, it happened very much by synchronicity. I had planned to move back to Melbourne and my daughter was very keen to move back move here when she turned 18. She just finished her HSC in New South Wales. So it was...
And now studying law?
Yeah, now studying law, yes.
Wow.
Yep. Got a lawyer in the family. And so it kind of all happened very much through synchronicity. So it felt like when things happen like that, my belief is that that's the journey I should take. And so I've taken that journey. It's been far more challenging than I expected, but I don't think that would be any unusual situation. You never know what you're going to do. And it's like parenting. Until you have a child, you don't actually understand how hard it's going to be. But again, I've made no secret that I am on a learning curve, and I think my learning curve is going to continue for the rest of my life. So I don't expect that I'll get everything right, but I'll certainly make things right when I get them wrong. That makes sense.
It does. It makes perfect sense. And thank you for being so open about that. Final question.
Yes.
What's 2 things you're passionate about that you want to bring to the Barry Plant Group, which is a very famous Victorian company, and BP for you stands for Big Plans? What do you want to bring to the table? What do you want to see the group do?
I think there's some really beautiful things about this group and the culture of this group that are really not known broadly. And I think it's been a sleeper brand through some of the preceding years before I took the group on. And so I really want to elevate the truth of this brand so that other people in our industry who want to work in a brand that values integrity and doesn't just talk about it or put it on the wall, this is a community that they would be welcomed in and would succeed in. So it's all about that, really, for me. The other thing is in bringing systems and process that really help our existing network elevate. I think there's a real opportunity for us, and certainly we're on a great technology journey in that sense, having rebranded the business and sort of updated the value offering. This is what it's all about, growth this year.
Brilliant answer. And I was at Kickstart, and I'd come from another event that morning, and I arrived at the Sofitel, and this thing was rock concert. It was going nuts in there. There's people everywhere, and I was like, wow.
Yes.
But I got to tell you, I loved the mix of the audience, male to female. Some great young talent took the stage and shared their story of how they'd been mentored by some of the great people of this group, and play it down the line is the biggest thing in teams ever.
Absolutely.
Like, if you can share that with someone and they do better from it, we have a team. But yeah, you got some great young talent coming through.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because as our guys were taking the stage and talking with this enormous humility that this group has, which is something I haven't experienced before in other groups with the top of the top, I actually leant over to Mike and I whispered, "This is why I'm here." Because to see our top people on stage sharing with such openness and no ego, not to get up and grandstand, but to actually genuinely want to share the things that they've learned with no reservation. To me, that's a really unusual thing in our game. I feel entrusted with bringing that truth to our industry.
Yeah, it was a big one for me. 2 weeks before, I was in the States and I saw similar people of a similar age speaking differently. And then I landed in Victoria, Barry Plant, and saw some street players really sharing how they protect the community. And I really liked the difference that I saw of look at me to look at the experience we're providing our customer.
I love that. I love that you could feel that, Lee.
Well, within 2 weeks, I went from minus 17 to 40 degrees. There's one temperature change. But, whenever someone's communicating, is it ego or info? Is that fork in the road? But they were talking about what they'd done on this property to get this result. And I did mention that day on the stage, it's important you move away from testimonial to experience. What experience are we bringing into the community that we serve? And the real estate community is everything. That's who we serve and what we do. But I hadn't met those young people before, whereas some of your seniors have been to the Complete Salesperson course for years and so forth. But seeing it played down the line was awesome for me.
I think that's one of the very special things about this group. I'm doing auction school at the moment,
Wow.
which is something we run every year, but I'm a student in auction school this year. I wanted to walk the walk and, I've always been fascinated by auction, so I wanted to sit in the class. And understanding that most of our directors have been through auction school with Mark Lynch, who's been with our group for, 18 years now, and just feeling what that experience is like, the bonding with the other people in the room, and knowing that, a good number of the people that are going through this experience with me are our future directors. How exciting. What a feeling.
It is exciting.
I can't express to you how special that is.
And no one thing happens in isolation, Lisa. So I'm going to bring something up here that someone may not know or no one knows about you. But if
I'm scared.
It's okay. It's all right. Hang in there. And we're live, no edits. So if no one thing happens in isolation, here you are in auction school and some of the younger ones come through. Lisa's an executive. She couldn't front a crowd of a street. And how would she go doing that? But Lisa, you have been a performer for many years and the front person of singing in the music industry, which is no different to being an auctioneer, working a crowd understanding, but not many people would have known you were a lead singer.
That's right. And it's while you'll always see me on stage, I've got to have a handheld. It's many years of habit forming. I can't do the Madonna style face mic, lapel mic. It's a very comfortable place for me to be, and I do love connecting with audiences in that way on a grand scale. So, perhaps I will be an auctioneer post-CEO. Who knows?
But isn't it interesting? And for anyone listening to this, their children's done music or, one thing about real estate that's very important, you've got to hire people that are not afraid of people. And music's wonderful for that. Or anyone who can sing karaoke can be in real estate because you've got to be around people. It was actually Chris Hamley that said that to me. Lee, you've got to hire people that aren't afraid of people. But the fact you've got those skills, and when did you first get into music?
17, I think, was when I first admitted my dream. I think I'd always, secretly had the desire, but it was probably 17 when I started performing. And it's interesting you talk about trained versus untrained. I did try to have singing lessons a couple of times, and I decided it took me too much out of my heart and into my head. And I'm a performer. I would say I'm a performer more than a singer. I don't think I've got the world's best voice, but I love connecting with people. So I don't want to be in my head thinking about what I'm doing technically. I want to be in my heart communicating how I feel in that moment in the song. And that is very much how I approach being on stage. I know in the times when I've overthought what I'm going to say, I'm stilted. If I can speak from the heart and allow it to come naturally, it's much more authentic.
Which is what you're doing now as a CEO.
Yes, yep. It's not anything. That's what I say. It's all about connection and taking the time to be present. What time is it? It's now. Always now. This moment's the only moment.
Lisa Pennell, a fantastic interview, and thank you for sharing your story, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Thank you, Lee.
Today's episode of We Are Selling was brought to you by Nexar. Nexar is the platform that is now partnering and delivering best-in-class real estate growth solutions that continue to perform over time. The Nexar platform has now partnered with some of our leading principals and teams in Australia. They are assisting with the lead generation engine of the company, agent loyalty, and the growth of the rent roll through connective communication. Nexar is doing the heavy lifting on nurturing your database to generate a pipeline for your agents and BDMs to convert to listings, sales, and new managements. Check the show notes and the link to episode 116, where there was a feature interview with Mr. Mark Kentwell. Thank you for listening. I look forward to speaking to you next week. My name's Lee Woodward. Goodbye.